seconds because I've learned that, you know what, I feel like having my hair down for this one. Oh. So I've learned to wait a little bit. It's so nice to see people here already. Look at that. It's a very positive beginning indeed, Radar Shadow. So here's how this is going to work. I said it's the old chat, so I'm just going to dive right into the old chat. And I'm going to, from Thursday, that I didn't get to do. And I'm going to say, thanks for being here. Let's get it on. All right. Netzarim said to Taylor, it's not so much that Yeshua disagreed with Netilat Yadayim. It's more about those specific Pharisees who are condemning Yeshua's Talmidim, his pupils, over something that isn't in the written Torah. So, once again, not a follower of Yeshua. I can only talk about it from what I can see from others who do follow him. And the controversies that Yeshua had with any other sect, I guess the Pharisees in particular, because they're singled out there, if I'm not mistaken. The scribes or Pharisees, some differentiate, some don't. What I saw there was, for me, problematic. The controversy, because I know what it brought upon the temple and the people and the nation, and I know later what happened, right? Because it's history. And I know that in 70 AD, according to the Christian calendar, or CE if you will, that second temple where the scribes and the Pharisees, the Essenes and the Sadducees and Yeshua himself, they say, walked there, prayed there, overturned tables there. And then it burned. Now it's a building, right? It's, as I've said, it's material things, it's fabrics, and it's earth, and it's water, and it's wine, and it's animal sacrifice, and it's vegetarian sacrifice. It's all external. There's great internal work there, of course, but it's a building. It's a building. And for that building to be torn down, our sages say because of sinat chinam, which is baseless hatred. The temple that burned, they say, because of the false piety and humility. Something very, very like conniving. And I hope to get away from baseless hatred all my life. I truly want to get away from baseless hatred, and that's what I was seeing there. The disagreement they had over Netilat Yadayim, I can't speak to it not being a man of halacha. But I can see Yeshua's point, and I can see the Pharisees' point. So he says that they argued over something that isn't in the written Torah. That's what Netzarim Nazarite says. So let's go with that. Let's go over arguing about something that isn't in the written Torah. There are different ways of interpreting the Torah, but for halachic purposes, halacha meaning, by and large, rabbinic law, as we know it now and before, and which before the writing of the Mishnah and its sealing by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Yehuda, the president, the high and mighty sage of his day. Until that time, different people had different traditions. They still do. Halacha was, they say, it says in the Brachot, and it says in the Talmud that from the day that the temple was destroyed, God only has 4 cubits of halacha in his world. And I've spoken of this in a previous video. I don't recall if it was this channel or the old channel. I won't get into it right now, but the controversy was because of an interpretation, let's say, because we do say, Asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu, meaning who sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to, when we wash our hands before we break bread. Even though it's not written in the Torah, it is one of the commandments. And that is a controversy worth having. I think it's the kind of controversy that can bring people together through the exchange of ideas. And I think there's a reason why the Sanhedrin later did not find Yeshua guilty, right? They said it's like it was neither here nor there. Teku. Kind of. I think that says a lot. I think the fact that the Sanhedrin, and maybe I've got it all wrong, But I think the fact that the Sanhedrin, if I'm not mistaken, did not find him guilty, that it speaks volumes. But that's where I'll leave it. Sneezer said, "This is holy work, though. We of many faiths are all coming together and mostly agreeing." I think I said that, which means that I skipped. I said that I remember saying it on Thursday, so I guess I skipped something, or rather. Sneezer says, "Certainly discussing peacefully." And he says, "Your firstborn, who's still here right now, and he was there on Thursday, is clearly audible now and right in some ways. To be ready to die is selfish, but you know God would protect your family. They don't." Well, I wouldn't presume to know what they know or not know, the other people in my family. And yes, there is a selfishness in a way. I will be the first to admit that I have many selfish facets. I'm not free of ego. I'm not free of... definitely I'm selfish. And more than I ought to be. Because you do need to be selfish, a little bit. I'm more than that. Pili said, "Hola, desde Barcelona." I'm assuming that means hello from Barcelona. Hi, at the time. Ezra said, "You are a blessing, stay strong." I don't know if you were referring to me or someone that I spoke of in the chat or somebody in the stream or somebody who earlier went in the chat. I'm not going to go back for it, but may we all be a blessing. May we all stay strong. May we all gather strength and go from strength to strength. Children rarely understand, said Sneezer. Well, yes and no, because they understand certain things that I, being an adult, have forgotten. That's part of the wonder, and I've spoken of this, of being a father. I get to experience that second childhood vicariously, from a very different point of view, from a very different position in every conceivable way. It's a great blessing. And some would say it's a virtue to not understand, right? What does the psalm say? Behemot hayiti imach, bani bar velo eda, right? I'm ignorant, and I do not know. I am like livestock against you, or for you, or with you, imach. Sneezer said, but Hebrews, I'm assuming he wanted to write Hebrews, it says Hebrews, and I'm assuming he didn't want to write Hebrews, but Hebrews have a voice of God, our spirit. Right, so spirit, if you're talking about the kind of ruach that resides traditionally in the heart, and, well, the voice of God, our spirit. Good, I like that. Ezra said, Shmor al hamishpacha sheli, guard my family, ve'al ele she'ani ohev, and those I love. Ho shomer Israel, O keeper of Israel, she'eno nirdam ve'eno yashen, which does not sleep and does not slumber. Ani mafkid et ruchi biyadcha. Or beyadecha. I entrust my spirit into your hands. That's a lovely little prayer. Lower place, I think Ezra said this because it was someone else, or maybe him, who said, or the dude Noam, who was a Hebrew speaker or a Hebrew reader, and he said, what is the best prayer? No, I'm sorry. Then I would have answered him right then and there, wouldn't I? You tell me in the chat, I'll zip to it, because I'm reading the old one. Did I answer this already? The question of what is a good prayer for... I'll just keep reading. Forget it. It's all good. Let's just say that's a lovely prayer, whether it's for Noam in the chat on Thursday or not. It's a lovely prayer. It's one that I don't recognize offhand. I recognize the words as being references. I wonder if this is a translation, if it's Ezra coming up with a prayer on the fly, if it's a very famous prayer that I don't know. I don't know, but it does sound like something one would say before sleep, much like in Arvit, the evening prayer, or the Shema at bedtime. Sneezer said, lower place that it needs to get back to. Yep, coming soon, here already. A lower place that it needs to get back to, it needs to get back from. Okay, he clarifies that later, because I wanted to make sure too, and then I saw that. Okay, a lower place, right. Speaking of the daughter, speaking of Malchut, a lower place that it needs to get back from. Right. We, creation, by and large, are considered the feminine in the grand scheme of things. It has different frames of, let's say, field and time, right? Time and space on what that lower place is and what it represents and what Malchut represents. But it can, in some ways, represent all of creation, because there is a way in which we are counterparts of the divine revelation, right? The famous Hebrew cone, if you will, of what is it that an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being lack, right? Attributed, associated with God are those three major things: all-knowing, all-seeing, and all time, across all time. So what does God lack? He lacks the ability to lack. He lacks the barriers. And we are here, right? What does an infinite thing lack? Finitude. There's a very deep teaching by the Ari, and Chassidut make a lot of it, obviously, baked right in there, the Ari is, about how God in the beginning, how he narrowed himself down in a process that the Ari called tzimtzum. There were a couple of them where there was, from that infinite light, let's say, which I consider divine revelation, and someone consider the divine itself, there came a small string, let's say, of light. And there was a movement there that's very, it's called a mate velo mate, touching and not touching, or coming and not coming. A movement there that's very reminiscent of when people talk of the original vibrations of creation. That's what I think of. To get to that place, Malchut represents in some ways all creation, and we all need to be elevated. And we here in this world, we elevate this world and many other worlds. Like I mentioned, like when you pull the lever on a pinball, is that a lever, a spring? When you pull the spring on a pinball machine, and you go all the way back, but you need to go back in order to have more energy to go forward. And that's part of what we're doing here, especially since we've been cast out of Eden. Sneezer says, it's why all the rainbow fruitcakes running around. I'm not a fan of a lot of things, but rainbow fruitcakes doesn't sit right with me. Unless you mean actual rainbow-colored fruitcakes, which grew legs and are running around, that could be. But let's say you're talking about the Alphabet Squad, or people who lift the rainbow flag in this June, allies and such, and those of the squad. Lower place that it needs to get back from. It's why all the rainbow fruitcakes running around. Well, I'll tell you, and this is all I'll say about this right now. I know that sexuality is such a sensitive and fragile thing that I wouldn't be very quick to call anyone a fruitcake. If by fruitcake you mean insane. Maybe you mean literal fruitcake. Let's carry on. Taylor 26 said, Sadducees seem to believe in whatever serves them. They were in, oh, by the way, I'll read this again, but by the way, those of you who are here and who are engaging with me right here, right now, would you want me to refer you to the old video in the chat so you could read along with the old chat, or, I don't know, would that help anybody? Let me know. Okay. Sadducees, said Taylor, seem to believe in whatever serves them. They were in alliance with Rome more so than the Pharisees. When I first read the books of Maccabees, I was surprised at how Judah and his brothers were very much for Rome. And, well, not surprised. It was a great civilization. I wasn't surprised. I just didn't know that they had a pact, or I didn't know that it was them who made the pact. I thought it may have been more down the line, but that they conquered Greece and Rome was not yet a factor. It definitely was, and I suppose they knew that. If that is actually seen as a history book, right, the book of Maccabees, and some maybe would disagree. But that's what I read there, I think, in Maccabees 2, that there was a pact. They were very impressed with the fact that they have chosen ones from the people. They were very impressed with the fact that the Senate existed, and that, well, they had all the progress, if you will, alongside different horrors, no doubt, but progress in many things. Sadducees liberal, Pharisees conservative. That's how Sneezer summarizes it. I don't know enough about the Sadducees, but yes, definitely the Pharisees were conservative, literally in the sense that they conserved certain things and other things went away. And if you're talking about service, I think that the Pharisees, the scribes, Chazal, our sages, I think they did, even after all, do the Hebrew world and the world at large, I suppose, but the Hebrew world, let's say. The fact that the Mishnah was written down, there are so many things wrong with that sentence. Why it had to be written down, what it had to undergo in order to be written down, what had to be kept out eventually when halacha was ruled for the people. And I started speaking of halacha before and the controversies and the differences of opinion, and some are good and some are not as good, as we see. But the idea was to have a path for the people to follow. These people who are about to go through a horrible time. We need a religion now. It was a faith, it was a way, it was traditions. It needs to be an organized religion. We need to write down the oral Torah that traditionally has been passed on, since Adam, certainly since Moses. Certain halachas, if not all of them. I know that's also a great difference of opinion and controversy on when the oral law actually came to be as we know it. Some say right alongside there on Sinai. Some say no, way afterwards. Sadducees liberal, Pharisees conservative. That's it. That's one way to look at it. And I don't know how true it is or not, but it's definitely one way to look at it, and it makes sense to me on the Pharisee side. Sneezer, Taylor says, I see it as the reversal. So you see it as to get back to. Well, yes, to get back to, it's that in the sense of it's us doing it, right? And Eden and everything that will flow from there. If we are talking about a time that's after Eden, I can't even understand what that might be. I can understand the story of Eden to the degree that I can, and it's written in the tongue of men, for men, and women, obviously. I'm talking about mankind. What happens afterwards is a debate even among the great mystical sages and others. Right? The world traditionally is 7,000 years, just like 6 days of the week and a Shabbos, 6 years of this, and then the Sabbath of the land, 7 Sabbaths, and then the Jubilee on the 50th, corresponding with the 3 higher Sfirot at that point, to the higher consciousness, to the higher being, to the higher divine revelations. And the place it needs to get back to and from, people say that we are only in the second of 7 cycles, let's say, of 7,000 years. People talk in archaeology and such about different civilizations which existed here 10,000 years ago and 20,000 and 50,000 and so on, if I'm not mistaken. Definitely evidence of 20, 30,000 years, I think, right, of things built that they don't know how in different locations and things corresponding to different locations. And there's a very good chance there was quite an advanced or not so advanced civilization, which was, well, I don't know how to phrase it, but something which we are finding now and not understanding. And it could simply be a factor of time, but I'll leave it at that right now. So to be in the second cycle out of 7, in the second 7,000 years, out of 49 leading to 50, just like the 49, the 7 Sabbaths of the land and the Jubilee, the 7 weeks of the Omer, and then Shavuot, right, the counting of... Still have work to do, says Sneezer. 100%. World peace should bring about Eden's return, though that too may take time. It's on us, it's on each and every one of us, each and every individual, at every given moment. That's why the sages say in the Mishnah, a person should always think of himself as on a scale, right? And the world right along with him. And if he does a good deed, then good for him, he should be happy. He has tilted the world towards kindness and goodness and righteousness, presumably, and if he did a bad deed, a transgression, he tilted the world a little bit now towards disorder, let's say, towards unbalancing the world, towards evil. And who was it? It was the Rebbe Mepitzisne, I don't remember, the great sage of the last few hundred years, a Hasidic rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, an Adamo anyway, a great rabbi. And he said a person should carry around 2 notes in his pocket. One that says, the world was created for me. And another one says, and I am dust and ashes. I like to say of myself that I want to keep my head in the clouds and my feet firmly on the ground. So I'm shooting for the same thing. Definitely, because it's on us. The good things we do, the bad things we do. Whether you believe in heaven or hell is irrelevant because it's happening here in each and every body and each and every mind, broadly speaking. Taylor 26, fair enough, I'm dyslexic, he says. Liberals are for the people, continues Taylor. Pharisees were also for the people. Sadducees were the elite rich. Republicans are also into that. Well, I can't speak of that not being in the United States. Wait, I'll go here because I think I move out of the frame whenever I read the chat. I did it again. I'm sorry, I can't keep a good frame here. I'll be better in the future. I'll be better. I just restarted this regularly. Speaking of which, it's already been 21 minutes. I'm so very thankful for each and every one of you. Those of you who are in the chat that I haven't even gotten to yet. Those who made comments that I'm going to get to yet maybe later or tomorrow. Those who are here, those who will be, those who just come for a second, those who leave a like, those who show up early and begin the chat without me even here, spreading good vibes. And it's just there in the chat when I come in. It's such a blessing, it's such a privilege, and it's such an honor to be here and engage with you. I truly cherish it. I want to keep doing it, God willing. I'd like to lead the kind of life that will enable me to never stop doing this, never have a reason to feel so shitty about myself that I decide I'm not going to live stream today. Or tonight. Also, I have major problems with names, says Sneezer. Having lived as all of them, they tend to mix. Having lived as all of them, they tend to mix. Hopefully he clarifies a bit down there because I don't know what he's saying. Sneezer, if you're here, please do clarify. You have major problems with names. Having lived as all of them, they tend to mix. Oh, I'm sorry, he continues later on. To mix. No, it's to mix. Okay. So they tend to mix. Names. Maybe he will clarify later. Pharisees wrote against the high priest in the Mishnah. I'm not sure what he means by that. This is what I get for only broadcasting for 2.5 hours on Thursday. Actually, it was 2 hours and 25 minutes, but who's counting? I was, because it's still linear. From when I started a couple of weeks ago or so, it's been going up linearly, and I'm enjoying it. I'm not saying I'm committing to it in any way, but it just so happened organically that that's what's happening, and I love that. I love that. To me, it's like a sign to me that it's something worth continuing. Sadducees only wanted to conserve the 5 books of Moses. Pharisee oral law is a progressive development. That's what Taylor said at the time. And then he says Pharisees wrote against the high priest in the Mishnah. Well, I hope that he brings an example. Sneezer says this Pharisees Sadducees question is one researched maybe 6 months. I researched maybe 6 months ago. There are no coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences either, not really. Sneezer says dyslexic, at least when I was diagnosed, wasn't just letters, numbers, numlexia. Well, I know in Hebrew it's called dyscalculia, but maybe it's other things in other languages. I think they call it now. Oh, they call it now. Maybe it was that, and numlexia, dyslexia, numlexia. And it's actually the brain flipping concepts. Wow. That question could be better phrased. Do you have a king? Who is it? Do you claim kingship of your own home? I'm not sure if he's referring to the question before that, the Sadducees Pharisees question. Yes, he is. So the question is better phrased as, do you have a king? Who is it? Do you claim kingship of your own home? I wonder what Sneezer means by that. Hopefully maybe he'll clarify. Hang on. It's Minas's mom. Can you call her? Sorry about that. Ariel. Oh wait, Russ Singh. Russ Singh is here. Can you answer her? Pardon me. Family life. Okay. Okay, call her now. Because now I just got off the phone with her. Okay, Ariel said, Sneezer, it is for God to decide the circumstances surrounding world peace. If he is here to fulfill the Torah and prophecies, then he is more than welcome to do this. But I think that many Jews are tired of the spiel and want to see the results, because in order to classify something or someone, they need to fit into a definition. Sneezer responds, I think that ultimately all are the evil to delay the evil to delay it till appointed time. And he says to the second point, I would agree, which is why I don't say he has to accept Jesus as king or God. He hasn't received or seen the proof yet. And that breaks my heart, says Sneezer. It means he thinks he will die in sin. Well, I referenced because somebody else, maybe it was Sneezer at the time, who referenced die in sin, and I addressed it at the time in the chat, and this is, of course, that very chat, only later in the chat, as we know, new week, old chat. Ariel said, please, thank you. Sorry for the interruptions, folks. Ariel said, well, as I said, generally, I generally think we all want certain prophecies fulfilled. Ras Singh says, Orthodox religion tend to have my favorite art. That's nice. It's nice to appreciate art. I'm not a connoisseur, but I do love a good niggin, a melody. Sneezer said, he doesn't understand he's been judging himself correctly his whole life. Or perhaps not correctly, too harshly. I have the fortune that when I rest, not die, having died already many times, he says, my work will be done and I can rest in peace. Well, let's put it this way. I hope and pray that I would lead such a life that when it is my time, I will truly be able to rest in peace, having done the work. Now, in some ways, the work never ends. Also based on a psalm that the righteous people have no rest, not in this world and not in that world. Not that I'm saying I'm righteous, but I do hope to be on my deathbed a righteous man. That would be pretty frickin' cool. Somebody who leads a life of righteousness. Netzarim Nazarite said, I'm for an objective standard on some things. Right, we were talking about morality, ethics, and should there be a subjective sort of mainstream baseline, whatever the phrasing was. But for some things, okay, objective standard for some things, but not other things, he said. The Ten Commandments, objective. The color of your tzitzis, as long as there's blue, subjective. For example, right? So the Ten Commandments, objective. The color of the tzitzit, subjective. But who would enforce it? He says. Who would enforce it now? I'm assuming you're talking about who would be enforcing it now. There are different communities that do enforce their own code of ethics, morality, law. So those who choose to live under such circumstances of whatever faith or way of life, and they either, in most cases, I think, they give away that question of objectivity and subjectivity to a higher power, someone speaking for a higher power. So the ones who enforce it, and this is the lovely thing about the Hebrew faith, about Judaism specifically as a religion, as something coming out of the ashes of the burning of the Second Temple, as something that codified halacha, then the Mishnah, the Mishnah and halacha, and which continues to this very day, right, and the Talmud and the Midrash. 4 cubits of halacha that God has after the destruction of the temple. I think that's what we're talking about here. And different communities, different traditions have different halachas. There are some that say that it's Elijah the prophet who will come before the coming of Adonai Hagadol veHanora. That we will have one way. Again. In a way which is not contrary. Because right now, if I look around in Israel, and maybe not abroad, because it's a different story, but maybe, I haven't really been part of Jewish communities abroad. There is so much, understandably, there is so much reluctance to leave the ways of our fathers, even if they are ways of galut, of exile. We were in exile close to 2,000 years. And sure, people always lived here, Hebrew people, Jewish people, people of Judea, of the kingdom, of the place. But the nation wasn't here. So many things changed, and halacha was something that changed along with it. And as I said before, even though I'm not a man of halacha, I did keep strict halacha for years, and it's a life that it will always be my home, Orthodox, right? Modern Orthodox Judaism. There are people who would enforce it, certain communities, certain people who would judge if you choose to be judged by them. There's the rabbinic Beit Din, the rabbinic court. There is such a thing. Now, it does a lot less. Deals mainly with, let's say, marriage, deals with death, deals with, things of that nature. Objective, subjective. Sneezer says, because my entire life was working towards world peace, even when I was an atheist. That's a lovely virtue. That's a lovely thing to have. That's really wonderful. It is for the angels and demons to enforce, said Sneezer. The angel and demons being the ones inside of you that guide you? The angels and demons being the ones that you are later subjected to after death, or as like a karma sort of thing in life that you need to burn it off? I wonder how you mean it, how you meant it. Oh, I guess we're coming to the end because Radar Shadow said, thank you for your time. Not us, said Sneezer. We are not even worthy of judging. Well, in the Mishnah, incidentally, it said that I don't remember the names of the sages who did this, but one said, I swear on the worship, on the ritual worship of the temple, right, while it was still around, that is. I swear on the worship, ha'avodah, I swear on the ritual worship of the temple, that there is nobody in these days, remember, days of Second Temple, still standing, there's nobody alive these days who can rebuke. Another said, there's nobody alive these days, I swear it by the worship, by the ritual worship of the temple, I swear it, that there is nobody who can receive rebuke. And, well, there might be a third one. I don't want to misspeak on the name of that sage, on his behalf, so I'm not going to say it. Let me think of it very briefly in Hebrew. I don't remember the third one. Am I too slow right now? I'm feeling kind of sluggish. It's 10:30. It's been a long day. It's been a long day. I'm very happy with this day. I worked a lot. I was with the kids. It was good stuff. I'm sitting down here at the end of such a blessed day. Sure, there were a few moments of, because it's life. But if I can sit here right now and be here with you good people, what a great blessing this is, truly. Okay, you people have waited so patiently. Thank you. I'm not going to go to the comments that I had lined up to my notes. I'm going to go right into the chat here, now. Let's see how we're doing. Whew. Peace and Coffee says, maybe if he's still here, I've been on for 33 minutes, good people. 33 blessed minutes. The world exists for the sake of kindness. Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, the 11th century. He's quoting him here. And he quotes Rabbi Akiva of the time of the Second Temple and the Roman conquest, and the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, or Bar Kuziva. Beloved is man, said Rabbi Akiva, for he was created in the image of God. And the Vilna Gaon from the, 17th century, the Vilna Gaon? Rabbi Eliyahu Hagra. The entire purpose of our existence, said the Vilna Gaon, is to overcome our negative habits. Right? Make room, make a vessel, and divinity will dwell in it. And the way we make a vessel is to overcome those parts of us that are still hindering. And it's a give and take. It's a tug of war. And sometimes it feels like a great tug of war. And the Gemara says, right? The Talmud says that later on, when the evil inclination is slain and death is taken from the world, we eat from the tree of life, right? It all comes together and maybe restarts. And the people who are righteous would see the evil inclination, Yetzer Hara, as a huge mountain, like an insurmountable mountain. And they would say, how could we be expected to brave this mountain and climb it? The wicked ones would see the evil inclination as a tiny, minuscule strand, like a hair, and say to themselves, how could we not overcome this? Right? The world was created for me, and I am but dust and ashes. Well, now it's going to bug me. Who said that? Not Petzisne. Pesishche? The Pesishche rabbi? Was that it? The rabbi from Pesishche? Pesishche? Okay, let's continue in the chat. Very positive beginning, says Radar Shadow. Radar, man, you've been making it for so many of these live streams. Other guys as well. This is such a blessing. Paula is here. Robert is here. I'll go quickly before I continue in the chat and give these hellos if anyone else is here. Ariel Marshall is here, or was here. Who else? Who else? That's it. Good. Let's do this. Okay. Sneezer says, one who has no fortune to share usually has more value to give. If you're talking about material wealth when you say fortune, I believe it was Bishop Mar Mari Emmanuel the First. Not the first. The Bishop Mar Mari Emmanuel I copied that from, though likely not the originator. One who has no fortune to share usually has of more value to give. Well, you could think of it in the sense of, well, money, what's money, comes and goes. But if you're talking about a different kind of fortune, then let me know. The stream tells no lies, Sneezer says, quoting Oma Desali or Desalis. The stream tells no lies, but standing alone on the shore, the dishonest man still hears them. I like that. That's really good. I'm going to Google that name later, I hope. Paula said Frank Costanza is hilarious. Yes, he is. Hey, and then I showed up. After all this goodness, I showed up and said I might be a minute, and here I am, 37 minutes going strong. Thank you people for being here. Sneezer says, so I used Kalud AI to create a language using only 49 words, meaning 7 letters in pairs, that has its own gematria and communicates very effectively. We'll make a video to demonstrate. A project I'd been working on a few years previously, I expected would need far more than 50. So in a few years, something you expected would need far more than 50, and now it won't be more than 50? I'm trying to understand it here. But the idea of creating a language using AI is interesting. I'll gladly watch the video. I mean, yeah. Give me the video. Sure, go for it. Maybe I'll visit your channel and see what you're up to. I don't know if I think I did visit Sneezer in his channel. But either way, if you're going to post that video, man, I might check it out. Robert says, everybody, I just seen archaeological evidence about King Chizkiah and the king of Assyria, proving the Bible true. At the time, the Romans that tore down the temple... Oh, okay, so he was talking about something else. I just skimmed down because I saw he was there. I just seen archaeological evidence about King Chizkiah and the king of Assyria, proving the Bible true. Well, are you talking about the time that the angel came out and how much was it? It was 100,000, 160,000? Well, anyway, there was one time when the king of Assyria was surrounding Jerusalem, and, well, they were all dead by morning. A messenger of God took care of it. And the, well, and if I'm not mistaken, that was Assyria. Unless there was one other time, it wasn't the same time. There was one other time when it was either Assyria or a different army that came to Jerusalem. I may be mixing things up. People, correct me if I'm wrong. And the enemy camp in the night heard a great disturbance, and they thought, oh no, the Israelites have hired the kings of Moab to come after us. Run. I don't recall. It's too bad that I don't recall, but I'm trying to think of two different stories, so it's mixing up in my head, and I don't want to sit here and think for 30 seconds right now. I'll keep going with the chat. So let's say proving the Bible true. That's something that would be lovely. There will always be people who would say that it's a bunch of BS. There are people who believe these things with all of their heart. Anything, in that spectrum. I don't personally need anybody to prove the Bible true. It would be nice to have the material, well, the material. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? See, it's almost 11 and I'm tired. The evidence to back it up, anyway, would be nice. Can't prove scripture true, says Sneezer, but that it has survived so much, attempt to destroy it is correlative too. Jerusalem was sacked because they would not obey their king. It's not baseless. It's what order demanded. I think that there was baseless hatred at the time. I think if people were more unified in Jerusalem at that time, and I say that from here, 2,000 years later, almost, or actually 2,000 years later, over 2,000 years in some cases, right? If we're talking about our sages in the Mishnah. If you're talking about baseless hatred, I'm saying that it does exist. And obviously hatred, which is, I think, earned, does exist. The Torah, when it speaks of, right, in the 5 books of Moses, when it says, when you see the donkey of he you hate, when you see the ass or the donkey of a person you hate, and one commentator, it might be Rashi, says, who is it that you hate? Somebody who you saw commit a great transgression, but since you were the only one who witnessed it, you can't testify, because according to Torah, only 2 people can testify and put a man to death, and put a man to, well, whatever, but definitely 2 people need to testify at the very least to corroborate any kind of accusation or indictment, whatever you need 2 witnesses for something to have hold in reality. And this person saw somebody commit a great transgression, and he was the only one who saw it, something that's, let's say, worthy of hatred, and he can't do anything about it, and so that's the person you hate. And there's the very famous don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. There has been baseless hatred. There still is baseless hatred, unfortunately. But it comes back to the individual for me, and if I try to act in a way that is more loving and kind to me and to those around me, I'll be able to love more, and baseless hatred won't even be a factor, God willing. That's not to say it was correct, but whatever happens, says Sneezer, is what God willed. Robert says, at the time, the Romans that tore down the temple, Yeshua and his Talmidim loved, was torn down by pagans. Rome, of the Jewish sect, the followers Yeshua, yet so blame the pagans. Basically is what I'm saying. There's no punctuation there, so I'll go through it again. Hang on. At the time, the Romans that tore down the temple Yeshua and his Talmidim loved was torn down by pagans. Rome of the Jewish sect, the followers Yeshua, yet so blame so blame the pagans, basically is what I'm saying. Okay, I'm sorry, I still didn't quite get what you were saying there. I'm sorry. Oh, I hit pause here. Okay. Hit the subscribe and like button, says Robert. What's up, Daniel Hurwitz, little Levite? Okay. Being only a little bit selfish is the eternal struggle. Yeah, I suppose it is. Exactly right. I agree. Sneezer continues and says, it is a virtue to not understand, as well as children often not understanding. They misunderstand far less. We often hold much misunderstanding, says Sneezer. Robert, and I agree. I don't think you answered the good prayer simply because it was at the end when you were closing. Okay, so the good prayer. I'll say it now. It's something I've said many times before. Not a specific prayer, though if he does mean a specific prayer, I have one on hand as well, but spontaneous prayer. And I'll get very specific now for a few seconds, if you'll indulge me. Just this morning and earlier in the afternoon when I was walking Pinky, I recently start mine, and on and off, but recently, the last few times, I've started mine with, as if I'm introducing myself to the divine revelation. Right? Hi there, I'm Yonatan, I'm 41, I'm this, I'm that. Start from the very basics of who I am and what I'm doing. It usually can flow very much from there. It depends on your set and setting, of course. like any good psychedelic experience. If you want to expand your mind, if you want to reveal yourself to yourself, if you want to reveal divinity in you, or spend an hour crying about how far you've fallen, there's a connection to be made there if you can get the words out. And sometimes it's so difficult to get words out that all you can do is sob. All you can do is be silent, whether it's for gratitude or for failure. That 1 hour when you have a broken heart, or 5 minutes daily of hitbodedut, of spontaneous prayer in seclusion. And not necessarily physical seclusion, but just you being with yourself. Right, and with the Most High. Me being with Pinky, notwithstanding. And that's how I speak. So for an actual prayer, I'm a big fan of the prayer which is recited at the opening of the Ark, not of the covenant, but of the Torah, in synagogues, in shuls, in temples. That is modern day Jewish temples. When you open up the Ark on Shabbos, you say one thing from the Zohar, and afterwards there's a prayer. And there's a prayer that you utter after that part from the Zohar, and it's different on the high holidays. It's different, and I love that prayer so much. I won't utter it here, I don't know it all by heart. I'll reference it in the comments when I'm done here, I hope, or I'll put it in the chat. But it's a beautiful prayer. It's very short and very simple, and it encompasses a lot. Robert Harrison says, Bible trivia, what 2 Levite prophets was in the Old and New Testament? Well, you mean named? Because I know that in the New Testament, things are referenced, right? This and this happened as was prophesied by this and that, or in order to fulfill the prophecy of this and that. So I think then it would be, Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu. I think. But I don't know. Or maybe Elijah. Maybe he makes an appearance in the New Testament. I don't know. Interesting, says Sneezer. I've always held the feminine is the unmanifested, reverse perspective. There is an element of the feminine which is unmanifested, and that is when the mother is pregnant. There are different stages of the development, let's say, us, spiritually and physically, in the sense of what's called mochin, in the sense of a divine revelation that is higher, that comes from moach. Moach means brain, right? And that's the left and the right hemisphere, corresponding to 2 very high sfirot, 2 very revelations, which are the mother and the father, and the expecting mother, let's say, which is the bridge between the 3 higher sfirot and the 7 lower sfirot, right? Higher planes of existence and lower ones. The unmanifested is something which the mother does, because you feel something growing inside of you, but it's not quite a separate entity yet. The mochin, right? Those revelations of Adonai haven't yet resided in that would-be baby. Because in our sages in the Talmud, they say occasionally that a fetus inside of his mother's womb is like this or like that, referencing different things, and saying that we learn the entire Torah when we are in our mother's womb, and then an angel, when we are born, comes and boops us over here below the nose at this cleft, and basically creates that cleft on the upper lip, and you forget the entire Torah, and you spend your whole life trying to get it back. When you speak of the unmanifested, there is a divine facet that is not manifested, and yet it's still part of you. And so, in that way, we are human beings that are manifesting and still unmanifested, because there's more for us to, right? And the more we empty ourselves, the fuller we are, and the closer we get to humility, right? And the more we can bring value, let's say, to us, to ourselves, and to others. And there are those, it's not a reverse perspective. It's, for me, very much part of the same perspective, because both relate to Malchut. One of them as the daughter and the bride, and the other one as the mother and the expecting mother. And then the mother that actually gives birth, and the mother that raises, the mother that keeps, right, and that embraces. A lot of right, corresponding with Bina, corresponding with that great bridge, the 50 gates. Robert says Elijah and Moses was both in the Old and New Testament. I was right about Elijah then. Oh, I see. So you don't mean those who were named. You mean those who were actually present, right? I am assuming that's what you mean. Sneezer says Moses wouldn't be Levite though. Levite being descendant of Aaron, his brother. So no, Moses was a Levite coming from the family of Amram, which is from the family of Kehat, which is from the family of Levi, which is from the family of Israel. So he would be a Levite, but not a priest, although he did do priestly duties in the beginning until the priests took over. But he was a thing in and of itself. Moses was a once in a creation sort of creation. Pinball sounds like my approach to learning the Tanakh, says Ariel Marshall. Sneezer said, I'm specifically speaking of the very vocal Rainbow Warriors. Got no problem with LGB, only the TQ plus alphabet to me is CIA and FBI and such. So are you the type, because I don't know, do you believe that there really is a kind of societal coup de grace, or what's it called, a coup d'etat, whichever one it is? No, I'm thinking of coup de grace as cup of grace, a coup d'etat is a revolution, right? So do you really think that the alphabet is there to like overthrow everything? I mean, supposedly from what I've gathered, it's something which began in the halls of academia in literary criticism. And maybe sometimes it stays there, maybe sometimes it gets carried too far. I guess it comes down to the question of, can you sustain a society? There needs to be some degree of order. So CIA and FBI and such, so you mean it's people from inside your government trying to, what, rip society apart? I'm wondering to what end. I'm not contradicting you, I'm literally wondering. What would it gain? Is it simply to separate the people? Is it simply to cause strife and have, so they will be required and needed and get paychecks? How do you mean, I wonder, Sneezer? If you're still here, do drop a line. Robert says, Moses was Gershon Levite. Moses was Gershon Levite. I'm pretty sure it was Yaakov, Levi, Kehat, Amram, Moshe. I don't think so. He was a Kehati. Gershon Amram Yitzhar, Hebron, and Uziel were the sons of Kehat. And Gershon's sons, why don't I remember this offhand? We literally read this last week. I won't bother right now. It'll come to me. Is it Yachzeel v'Guni v'Yetzer v'Shilem? No, I don't know. I'm not going to look it up now. Somebody throw it out in the chat. Who are the sons of Gershon, the son of Levi? Mishpechot HaGershuni. Come on, what is it? Okay, never mind. Whoops, meant to add, says Sneezer, in my understanding, to the Moses, Aaron, Levite comment. Okay. And to add in my understanding. Oh, I see. Ariel says, kind of like Luke Skywalker trying to torpedo a Death Star after turning off my auto target. Luke, you turned off your computer. Is everything okay? Oh, wait. Did I miss my spot? No, okay. Ariel says, Star Wars is based off of scripture, loosely, of course. Well, you know, you can maybe make the claim that everything is based on scripture in one way or another, right? Because it all mirrors... damn it, how do I... Okay. Sorry. Okay, loosely, of course. Sneezer said to Ariel, Star Wars is based off of scripture, loosely, of course. Robert says, how did mysticism, something that's foreign to Israel, it's more Eastern religions, get into Judaism? They say, let's marry the two? Well, you'll have to define what you mean by mysticism, but if you mean, let's say, what's called the secrets of the Torah, or the meanings of the commandments, or what's called the yichudim, where you angle yourself spiritually, mentally, and physically in certain ways in order to reveal divinity in specific ways into the world, right? And in the world. Meditations and positions, and never done it myself, really. Though you could argue that I have, very, very briefly, and not in a Kabbalistic kind of way, in my Nazarite sort of way. Because I'm not a Kabbalist, right? I'm a student of the Tree of Life. I pray to always remain a student of the Tree of Life. Sneezer says to Robert, I'd argue mysticism basically started in Israel. Right, Kabbalah, mysticism, what people call mysticism, Jewish mysticism, is from the beginning, as far as I can tell. Right? The written Torah famously starts with the letter Bet, the second letter of the Hebrew Aleph Bet, and there's the Bet pointing back with its tail to what was before it and to the Aleph. The Aleph symbolizing everything that came earlier, the Aleph symbolizing the Tree of Life in and of itself in different ways, as the letter, right? From the way it's written to what it means, to how it's shaped. Worship of Baal and Molech and the others. But are you talking about... Oh, okay, so you're back to talking about Star Wars. Okay. Ariel said, but it goes back further than ancient Israel. Yes, I believe it does go back further than ancient Israel. It goes back, as far as I'm concerned, to Adam HaRishon. It goes back right there to Eden. Or some would say right after Eden. Because before it was something which was simply life in Eden, if you will. Existence, creation in Eden. And afterwards, there was this need to receive, right, Kabbalah, and it says in the book of Raziel that the way it happened was that after Adam and his woman, let's say, sinned and missed the mark and were cast out, the Sabbath had not yet occurred, right? We are still in that space between Friday and the Sabbath that never happened. And in that interval, right, all of creation, and here we are, history. But when he was cast out, there was still time before Shabbat. And they say that when Shabbat, the lower Shabbat, the Shabbat we experience now, not as creation, but as a day of the week, it's a taste of the world to come, a taste of the coming world, a taste of the world that is coming towards us. And Adam received revelation from an angel called Raziel. Raz means secret. And there was a need to receive something seemingly like external. He told him, here, you're going to need this. That's Kabbalah. You're going to need this if you're going to survive here in this world and navigate it and go through all your crap and stay in one piece and have balance and then study the lore of the 10 Sfirot. Now, the book Raziel HaMalach itself is traditionally not to be read, but to be kept. And it's a kind of something to keep in the house, let's say, currently. To spread good vibes, to ward off, let's say, evil spirits and material damage, if you will, right? Things in the physical and the spiritual. You can choose to believe in that or not, but to set aside and make sacred a type of book, to put it in your safe or in a safe place, to not just in your bookshelf, because it's not one that you open up and read. Now, there are people, make no mistake, who do study the book of Raziel HaMalach. I'm sure it's been translated. It has many amulets. I spoke of amulets last time. It has many prayers, and it also has the story of Raziel coming to Adam HaRishon, to Adam, after he was kicked out. And when the first Sabbath did come in, Adam sang praise of Adonai. Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat, a song for the Sabbath day. And he had that book. And he was ready to go and to work the land and to, by the sweat of his brow, grow his bread and make it. So mysticism is something that existed before Hebrews and nations, that existed before the different tongues. It exists right after we were kicked out, let's say, and presumably before that, right? Because the Tree of Life is a whole other thing and we didn't partake of it yet. And back when Adam was walking with God in Eden and having his fun with him before we were cast out, that was simply something that he knew, and he knew nothing else. But after eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and wearing clothes, getting kicked out, then he had to receive that. Then there was this need to receive. And I'm just riffing here. I don't even know if that's the case, but it sounds right to me. Sneezer says, even if you don't live stream, join us in the chat. See, again, I'm not sure what. Even if you're on live stream, join us in the chat. I'm not sure. Join us in the chat. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Sneezer. I don't know what I was saying at the time. This is a problem, people, because I love it that you're commenting, but I'm having difficulties matching up the chat to where we are now, if you will. And I'm not going to ask you, because I did once already last time, but I'm not going to actually tell you to put timestamps or to reference things. You can write whatever you want, and I'll be happy to read it, basically. A few provisos there, but basically. The last chat Thursday, I thought, said Robert, would be 30 minutes, but when I got back on and seen 2 hours, 45 minutes, I couldn't believe. Ha! Happy day one, y'all, says Nitzavim. Robert says, there was one time I didn't know if you would go live again. Thank God I was wrong. There was one time you didn't know. You know what? I'm doing it right now. I can't obviously commit, even though I would love to continuing the daily streams. But I do love them, as I've said many times before. Sneezer says, to clarify my comment in the previous video, I missed the second sorry. Sorry, was typing. Lived as everyone during my revelation, so the names that he went through. Not the right future leading to world peace, but all wrong futures. Yeah, I kind of understood that you meant that you've been there, done that in certain ways, and that you know that the way forward is to strive for world peace, right? Leading to world peace, starting first and foremost, as far as I'm concerned, with oneself. It says that that you need a great chutzpah. You need a lot of chutzpah. You need a lot of nerve to make peace with yourself. Evyatar Banai, the great artist, Israeli artist, poet, and singer, performer, I had the honor of being his backliner one time, or what was it? I think I was, when he performed sometime, and I was doing sound and lighting at the time. Evyatar Banai. To make peace between me and myself, it needs a lot of nerve. Needless to say, I don't remember much of it, but for weeks I did. So your revelation, you now consider it kind of a blur? You see it as something that happened, but you went through a lot in like a short period of time, and you don't remember much of it? I'm curious as to what that was. I mean, psychologically and spiritually. Nitzarim Nazarite. My name is Yehoshua Melech ben Avraham. I'm a king, LOL. Sneezer says, good, I was afraid I'd missed your answer to my king question. Not sure what I mean by it. Well, either way, you deny having a king, for example, by claiming yourself a king, or you have a king. Sneezer says, no, it was someone else referencing dying in sin. How I know you believe you will and could say that. I see, okay. So it was someone else. It was, okay. Robert says, I wonder if little Andre is in the chat silent. Well, sometimes he speaks, sometimes he doesn't. There are times when he, as we know because he said it, feels like he is biting his lip or his tongue. Radar Shadow says, faith by definition does not allow for proof. Does not allow. It's nice when you have it, but it doesn't necessitate it. You know, well, when you know, right? There was one point, I've mentioned this in the past, when I was 19, I think, 18 or 19. I was in Hitbodedut, right, in my spontaneous prayer and seclusion in the forest. At the time, I was in Tzfat, in my yeshiva years, right? And I said, that's it. I'm done. I won't need any more proof. I won't ever ask for proof. Ever again. Not as a vow, not as an oath, not this is, but that's what I said in spontaneous prayer. That's it. Adonai, you no longer need to reveal yourself to me to prove this, that, or the other. I'm gonna ride this out, right? Ride or die. That's what I said. Not ride or die, I'm paraphrasing now. Faith by definition, said Radar Shadow, it says, does not allow for proof. Though it's nice to have it. Sneezer says, by the way, I hope I won't be put to test in my faith. That's simply what happened at the time. I know I cannot die until my work done, said Sneezer. The only problem being the majority of it complete. I mean, rest. Okay? I know I cannot rest until my work done. The only problem being the majority of it complete. That's the problem, that the majority of it complete, but it always remains a majority, so you never quite do it. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Netzarim Nazarite says, if I remember correctly, the question was about an objective standard for all Yehudim, not individual communities. Who'd enforce it for all of us? Well, like I said, so you're referencing something which I referenced, which was spoken of on Thursday. See, connections are being made, and I love it. Okay, so that's what it was. Who'd enforce it? Elijah, they say, Eliyahu, tishbi yetaretz kushiyot ve'be'ayot. That's the acronym of Teku. And it basically means the one from Tishbi, the Tishbi, another name for Eliyahu HaTishbi, the Tishbi. You will solve the problems and quandaries. If I remember, I'm sorry. So now Sneezer says, angels and demons are entities. They can be within, but can also manifest. Yes, I'm inclined to agree. Thus, man need not enforce law, and indeed is not fit to. Leave vengeance to me, said Sneezer. Well, I'll tell you, there's a rule based on a line from, is it Yeshayahu? Which is, Mikan shenitna reshut lamashchit lechabel. It's not a rule, but it's a memra. It's something it's a kind of belief in at least Orthodox Judaism. Let's say being in the wrong time in the wrong place, right? Meaning, you exercise, you diet, you do everything, you live a life of righteousness, and then one day you're jogging and you die of an aneurysm out of nowhere. Okay? Out of nowhere. And that's something which you cannot necessarily explain in a way that, he was a bad person, something happened. Meaning, even if somebody righteous is caught up at the wrong place at the wrong time, some say that's why you're not supposed to go out after sunset, because the time from sunset to the midnight, the Hebrew midnight, not 00, right, 12 a.m., the Hebrew midnight, from the first quarter of the night, that is sundown to midnight, from the first, it's half, from the first half, let's say, of the night, first half, and then the second half is from midnight, Hebrew midnight, until the beginning of sunrise. That first half is a time when judgment and the left hand and Sidra Achra, those who come in this form or that form to hinder us and to inflict different ailments upon us of sometimes actual physical illnesses and sometimes spiritual things. And that's also why people say you're not supposed to read Psalms in that time. And from midnight onward, there's what's called Tikkun Chatzot. There's what's called getting up at midnight to pray and to mourn for the temple nowadays. But even before, when the temple was still standing, that idea of the second half of the night being one of great revelation, which comes to fruition with sunrise. And then there's a shift. That first half of the night, din, the left hand, the hand that pushes away, right, judgment and wrath and vengeance. So angels and demons being able to have their time and their place, even if there's somebody righteous there, he may not be protected because the one who maims was given the authority and the permission to do so. That's the nature of this world. The angels and demons in the upper worlds do their job, and they do it here too. That's part of their job. The Ramak says that it comes down through all the chains of the other tree of life, let's say, what's the tree of death, or the unclean, the impure 10 sfirot. They don't fully correspond with the sacred and holy 10 sfirot from top to bottom. It's a kind of mirror image, the world of the klipot, if you will, a kind of mirror image, a little different, but there are, let's say, 10 sfirot, and there are different halls and chambers of the klipot. And there is great order. Everybody has his own position. And here, part of what they are allowed to do, the lower ones, the Ramak says, and I'm sure he brings this down from previous sages, that the chirping of the birds, he says, is the birds giving the world news on what is going on in the in the higher realms and chambers. And that there are some times, or maybe it's all the time, not all the time, maybe on Shabbos it's praise, but during the week, the birds, their regular chatter and chirping and twittering for the 6 days of the week has to do with bringing down the judgments and uttering them here in bird speak. And I say that just because if we're dealing with demons and angels, which are entities of a spiritual nature, and you say they can also manifest, I tend to agree. I think that all of creation at all of its levels, this being a kind of final stop, if you will, in a physical, very material world of knowledge of good and evil, it's like the bottommost place. And the manifestations here come from very, very, very high. And if you're talking about the world of the klipot, it's still a spiritual world, and as such is closer to divinity, to divine revelation. The proximity is nearer, even if their job is different. In that way, they have one up on us, the angels and demons. We have a choice, we have one up on them, an even greater one. I won't get into that now because I've spoken of it before. But speaking of the angels and demons and of the fact that the birds twittering bring down the judgment, here there can be seemingly great disorder and great chaos. This person now drops dead in the middle of a morning jog, and he was just giving thanks to God. He was doing his itbodedut while running. And he drops dead. Never hurt a fly. Was able to. He was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu master, because why not? But he wouldn't hurt a fly. And he got struck down in the prime of his life. Wife and kids, tons of family. What did he do wrong? Why did he deserve that? Right? By the time it comes down here, it's like the chirping of the birds. It makes no sense. We can't really understand it. King Solomon famously did. In the language of all beasts, they say, and living things, and others. And he controlled Ashmedai, the king of the demons, but I digress. Ashmedai got one over him, incidentally. But angels and demons are entities, so by the time it comes here, it manifests in ways which are sometimes not understandable, irrational. We don't even speak the same language. It sounds like the chirping of the birds to us. But it surely is coming down here and manifesting here, because here is where we can make a difference. So the manifestation in that demonic place and time, traditionally again attributed to the first half of the night, from sundown until Hebrew midnight, Chatzot Halayil, they can enforce their law, so man doesn't need to enforce it. In that way, I see what you're saying, because they are given permission to enforce the law, the angels and the demons. But nevertheless, we have the Torah, and it was given to us, and not the angels, and not the demons, and it teaches us to make law. We need to carry it on in oral traditions, right? We need to carry it on with the oral law. And the 5 books of Moses traditionally need to stay as they are, even though differences do exist. So I think law is enforced on both sides. And if you're talking about, I already answered with, I think it's Elijah, as they say, who will bring us back the one way, which is also, right, the rainbow, right, which is one thing but many colors. Speaking of June. Leave vengeance to me indeed. Robert says, has anybody studied that the Pashtun people, I think that's in India, are part of Bnei Israel, Hebrew Nazarite? Does lost tribes and you didn't continue? Okay. Or maybe you continued later. I don't know. Oh, wow, so much in the chat. Where am I? Oh, I lost my spot. Okay, here we go. Robert says, everyone is of the lost tribes. Well, I would disagree on the basis of the 10 tribes traditionally were exiled by King Shalmaneser II of Assyria. The second, I believe. And have not come back yet. It doesn't mean they don't exist. So in that way, everyone can claim kinship to the tribes. But to say everyone is of the lost tribes, it sort of misses the mark as far as the Tanakh is concerned. But if you're talking about a larger mankind and human race, then yes, we will be lost and found. God willing, Yah willing. Sneezer says, only Noah and family survived the flood. Okay, but he wasn't one of the tribes of Israel, right? Sneezer, love you, bro, but I gotta push back on that one. He says to him, I welcome pushback, brother. Robert says, continues, there's 6 tribes in Afghan, right? Afghanistan, presumably. Sneezer says, Osama Dasali is a fictional enlightened ancient from Stargate. I only saw the movie. I think James Spider was in it and Mili Avital was in it, and I saw it on a big screen. I was surprised to find 50 words enough to be effective. I suppose if you choose them very carefully, and you have, like in Newspeak, right? In Newspeak, in Orwell's 1984, in Newspeak, where you simply have one thing that means everything, and all the rest are cut out, non-functional. This is what it means. Right? Winston has this guy that he works with that later just vanishes. But he's the guy who's like, whoa, did you see the new Newspeak dictionary? Oh man, we're doing so many things. We've cut out so many words. They're so unnecessary. Who needs words? Winston's like, lately I've been posting music videos made with AI, said Sneezer. Music videos that you produce, music videos that you simply make with random music or popular music or chamber music. Let me know. Taylor, you seem quite calm despite the tensions. God bless. Thank you for having faith. Well, if you're talking about what's going on in the war, I can only do this because there are people at this very moment who are on those front lines and over there in the back, and people who are doing the same job that I did. Every guard post that I was ever in, somebody is there now. Every position, every outpost, every base, presumably, unless certain things moved. I think actually where I did the medics course, the military field medics course, I think that place moved to the south. Instruction Base 10, Bahadeser. I don't think it's where I did it anymore. I think all of those instruction bases were moved. Lately I've been, I'm sorry. Yes, so I do seem quite calm because I know that there are people right now at this very moment who did get called back, and I hope I won't have to get called back, but if I do get called back, I'll go running. I don't speak ill a lot of the state of Israel. I don't want to spit to the well from whence I drink. But when the second, and I've mentioned this in the past, which is why I feel free mentioning it now, when the second Lebanon war broke out, my unit, my platoon, I'm their medic, my platoon was very, very close to getting called back in. And after it ended, and in time I saw what happened there, I said, thank God that we weren't called back in. But now, in this war, I will go running if I'm needed. And I hope to God I'm not needed. I'm not a warmonger. I try to be very peaceful. But when you gotta fight, you gotta fight. Taylor 26 says, yes, the Jewish nation lost the temple due to baseless hatred. All of the Jewish groups couldn't agree on how to do the temple sacrifices. Sneezer says, all hatred is baseless, rooted in misunderstanding, but hatred alone is not capable of achieving such change without God allowing it. It was needed at the time for reasons we can't know. Oh, my woman gave me a kissy face. All right, I'm going to gush for 5 seconds about my woman. Okay, that was more like 3 seconds. Sneezer says, can't fully know. One being they had no king, which left them open to conquer. Shalom, says Ezra. Shalom, shalom to you. Nice to have you here. I'm so grateful for everybody who makes an appearance, everybody who says hello. It means a lot. Today, says Sneezer, the kings are mostly secret, running things from the shadows, like BlackRock and WEF. I don't know what WEF is. I don't know what BlackRock reference is. Somebody help me out in the chat. We love Pinky, good girl, says Robert. Isaiah is big in the New Testament. Oh, so I was right. But in that way of referencing the book. Taylor 26 asks, do you believe that Christianity is an inherently supersessionist? Supersessionist? I need to Google that word quickly. Supersessionism holds that the universal church has become God's true Israel. And so Christians, whether Jew or Gentile, are the people of God. God's true Israel. The church has become God's true Israel. Okay, now, taking that into account, I'll read it again. Is Christianity inherently supersessionist? Inherently, I would say no. That it's the new Israel? Are you talking to me? Yeshua, Jesus, was not exactly against the animal sacrifices. I don't know who you're asking, if you're asking me or a Christian in the chat here. But I will take a stab at it. Do I think that Christianity is inherently the church being the God? So again, no, I guess you're asking a Christian and not me, because I obviously have made my opinion on that very clear. Taylor 26 says Sneezer, of course he was against animal sacrifices. He died to be the last one. He continues and says to him, as for inherently suppressionist, I see, so I answered my own question there. No, that was the mistake of disciples and then later churches, which is what I would have thunk as well. No, Sneezer, says Taylor, Jesus never clearly goes against the animal sacrifices. The only New Testament book that clearly goes against the animal sacrifices is the book of Hebrews. Wim, who I learned with when I was in the Netherlands, gave me a Yiddish, I think it's a Yiddish, maybe it's a Hebrew and Yiddish book, a tiny book, the letter to the Hebrews. And I read it once, not the book, but back when I read the New Testament the one time, I also read that one. I disagreed with some of the things that were written there, obviously, but some of the things were pretty close to, hey, be a good Hebrew man. Right? It veered a little bit into our Lord and Savior Yeshua, which is where I tune out. But, okay. So the book of the Hebrews, I still have it somewhere. And many would say, no, that is not a holy book and you should cast it out. It's a Christian book. But I see it, in essence, as a Hebrew man writing to the Hebrew people. Whether or not he was wrong, you could argue. Whether it spawned this religion or, the Orthodox Christianity, the Catholic Christianity, whatever it is, all those early Christian churches, right? Like he says, the disciples and then the churches. But the book itself, I don't mind having in my home. Jesus never clearly, animal sacrifice, says Sneezer, was part of the Torah, and he came to complete the Torah. Okay, so that makes sense. Peace and Coffee asks, what are some key differences between Chassid Judaism and modern Orthodox Judaism? Please explain based on interactions, experiences, things you have read, and so on. Thank you. Well, the major difference is as Chassidim have a Rebbe, meaning somebody who you basically go to for halacha, first and foremost, practical matters. Second of all, he is your master, and there's a great bond between the Talmid or the Chassid and the Tzaddik, the righteous, right? The righteous, the sage, the righteous man, the Rebbe. What's called an Admor, Adonenu, Morenu, Verabenu. Our Lord, for lack of a better term, Adonenu, our Lord, our teacher, and our master. An Admor is the leader of a Hasidic group or a Hasidic cult or a Hasidic sect, a leader of a certain Hasidism. For instance, Rabbi Nachman of Breslev is called Ha-Admor mi Breslev, right? He was the Admor, the only one. You have many Admorim, plural. They each have their own Hasidic court, right? Or Chatzer, as it's known in Hebrew. The main difference is that Hasidut is very much steeped in Kabbalah, from the beginning anyway. In practical ways, sometimes you can't tell the difference between a Litai, a Yeshivish, right, and a Hasidish, because they both dress in some ways the same. The differences have to do with what you wear when, on certain festivals, certain hats, right, certain yarmulkes, certain ways of wearing your tzitzis. Let's leave it at that, as far as the initial differences. The differences in halacha are that modern Orthodox Judaism seeks to live in this world. Hasidism, I think, when you talk about it not as a way of life, but as a community, it's mostly a Haredi, ultra-Orthodox community, very strict, The Hasidic rabbis in certain things are stricter than the modern Orthodox rabbis. And the halachas and the poskim, they go to different rulers of halacha. If they have, right, a modern Orthodox Jewish person would go to a modern Orthodox or Orthodox rabbi, not necessarily a Hasidic rabbi or admo. I can't speak to any rivalry, but Hasidic Judaism, outwardly, currently, externally, is mainly Haredi, what's called ultra-Orthodox Judaism. But Hasidism, in its essence, Hasidism and modern Orthodox Judaism don't have that much. They don't have that much that's different. They don't. It's the same Torah. It's the same books like the Mishnah and the Talmud, the books of the Midrash. But there's a difference because the Hasidut is going the extra mile. A minhag Hasidut, a Hasidic custom, when I say that, this is something that was around not from Rabbi Yisrael by Baal Shem Tov, right, from 600 years ago. Yes, 500? Maybe 600, the Baal Shem Tov? Oh, come on, you said it. What was it? I think it was 600 years ago, the Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. I think that was 600 years ago. No, I'm sorry. I made that same mistake last time. I made that same mistake. It was, right, the Ari in Tzfat. Then, right, because of the Ari and because of what he did and because of the transformation Kabbalah underwent and the fact that it can now be revealed, that's exactly why Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov is credited with being the father of modern-day Hasidism and of the current Hasidism from around 300 years ago. Right, now I got it. So the difference is that modern Orthodox Judaism, there are more similarities than differences in Hasidic Judaism and modern Orthodox Judaism, even if on the outside they're very different. Inside and practically speaking, they usually study the same books. They might reach different conclusions. They might go different halachically they differ. If we spoke of liberals and conservatives, I suppose in this case the modern Orthodox Jewish person would be considered more liberal, willing to integrate more, whereas the Hasidic Jew would be more closed up, conservative, keeping to themselves and their communities, and going in the practices of their Rebbe, of their Admo. Now, I must speak of the connection still between the Chassid and the Admo, the Chassid and the Tzaddik, right? The pupil and the disciple and the master. I said last week, it was last week, the last live stream, and maybe before that too, there came that time when I was talking about bitul, right? About nullifying oneself, about having a kind of ego death when you're talking about connection to God and what's called dvekut, to cleave unto that tree of life in the divine revelation. And they say in Hasidism that the same things should occur with the tzaddik. The tzaddik knows you, he knows your soul, he knows the root of your soul, and he knows how to bring about the remedy and the adornments that you will engage in and partake of and take on in order for you to fulfill your specific, unique task here in this world. And while you can achieve that same kind of revelation of what it is you're supposed to do very specifically through ordinary Torah and mitzvot, good night, my son. While you can achieve the same thing through Torah and mitzvot, when you lehitbatel latzadik, when you sort of nullify yourself and have that ego death, and the tzaddik is the one who calls all the shots because he knows you better than you know yourself. That's the kind of thing that doesn't necessarily happen in modern Orthodox Judaism. I've had rabbis that I've had very intimate, very deep connections with spiritually and deep conversation. And I still wouldn't consider me to be mevutal. I don't seek to nullify myself and cancel myself out. And the Chassids do, some perhaps more than others, but that's part of Hasidic Judaism that they have their own niggans, and they have their own melodies, their own certain prayers.
I know.
Taylor 26 says to Sneezer, in principle, it does seem that Jesus is against the animal sacrifices, but it's not clear enough, it's ambiguous. Well, I think that it is a good thing sometimes to be ambiguous. And maybe in this case it is too. Because supposedly he came to fulfill one thing and return once again for another. This time taking all of us, right? Isn't that what the New Testament says? I'm in the hizah, says BMXers with dreadlocks. Hello, BMXers. Sneezer, very difficult topic. I technically agree with you. Sneezer says to Taylor, let's agree to disagree that it is 100% specified, and my view is at least close to. Okay, at least close to. Okay. Taylor says Jesus did not really complete the Torah, though. The promised borders of Israel, as expressed in the Torah, has never been fulfilled in history. That is correct. There's actually a difference of opinion, a machloket, over what those borders are. We know what it says, but we don't necessarily know where those geographical locations were. There's a lot of evidence pointing to this, that, or the other, but no 100% knowledge of, oh, this was here, that was there, and this is the promised land. And Rav Gabriel Nazir, he says this in his book Nezirut Yisrael, the Nazariteship of Israel, where he speaks of modern-day state of Israel, and he says the Nazarite doesn't need to cut himself out of the state of Israel, and it's still okay to live here, and it has been a great blessing to the Hebrew people, he says, and the borders aren't clear, and the land has not truly been the potential of it, physically and metaphysically, if you will, has not yet been reached, achieved, attained, but as a kind of intermediary, if you will, I'm paraphrasing his words, between that which is and that which is yet to come. He says that it is a sacred thing, and the Nazarite shouldn't be, not necessarily, a Nazarite, it's not that it shouldn't, but a Nazarite doesn't have to take himself out of the state of Israel and the general public here. Taylor 26, he is also not done working yet. Okay, right, I'm assuming okay, not done working yet. I agree with BSD, I don't agree with BDS. BSD, I'm not sure what BSD is, I'm trying to think. BDS is what? Boycott, diversify, and sanction? Not diversify. Boycott, delegitimize? What is it? Boycott something, something, deplatform, deprogram, not any of those, it's something else, and sanction. Sneezer says Jesus works through his church. Every Christian. Oh, so his church is every Christian, I see. Sneezer, says Taylor, I will say that the book of Hebrews is the only material in the New Testament to clearly go against the animal sacrifices. Jesus never made it clear, though. Right, so it was written by someone else. It's not part of the gospel. It's the book to the Hebrews, right? I agree with Palestinians. I don't agree with Palestine, says BMXers with dreadlocks. Okay. I do suggest, says Sneezer, that everything is based off scripture, but that's a secret. Well, he said scripture, but I'm going to go with scripture. I agree with Palestinians. I don't agree. Oh, I'm sorry. It was highlighted. I do suggest that everything is based off scripture, but that's a secret. Wink. David G. Yo, David G. Nice to see you here, my man. Are you located in Israel at the moment? Yes. He's in Jerusalem. Sneezer told him, all right, curious on if he served. If so, where? Not throwing any shade. I'm from here myself. So wait, I referenced it, so let's see, did he get... Okay, you know what, I'm just gonna, yes, I did serve. I did Hesder, but I wanted to do more. It was a whole thing, but I did Hesder. And if so, where? I was trained as a field medic. So I guess he got his answer when I was rambling. If when I was rambling, he was here. But in case you weren't, hi, David G. I'm a former field medic and infirmary medic. And I served with a platoon of tanks, though not in a tank myself. I would be the rescue, and when there were times when we did more infantry things, why I was just like all the rest of my brothers who were otherwise in tanks, but on foot. So yeah. So Armored Corps, Medical Corps. Not throwing any shade. Okay, good. I don't want to have shade thrown at me, I guess. Sneezer says, I think so, but don't know the details. We'll leave it to him. We both seem to have sticky T's. Sticky teas? Sticky teas. Stay in one piece. What makes you think you started as one piece? Wait, what? Are you referencing something else? Okay, I don't know. Ariel Marshall says, frustrating thing about your channel, dude, is that I always want to be able to get involved in the chat. So if I get behind for any reason, I always end up skipping forward and missing stuff. You know what? I'm sorry. Is there any way I could do it so it won't frustrate you? I'd like to know myself, because sometimes, because of the abundance of chat and folks and people, it's there's that lag. So I'm sorry, but it's happening for a good reason, so that's a silver lining. At least good reason as far as I can tell. Robert, no, I just popped in. Ariel, says Sneezer, so you're saying it has excellent rewatchability? By the way, says BMX, how was your Sabbath? My Sabbath was very good. I played Risk with the kids. That was fun. And it was peaceful. It was restful. Once again, just like every day, I had moments of, no. But altogether, those, I will say, to my credit, which I don't do much, I don't pat myself on the back much, a few times in the recent month or two, there were bad vibes. Right when it was getting to be Shabbos, and before, throughout the day, things that were my fault, not 100%, but my fault, and we went into this Sabbath in such a great vibe, and we continued this Sabbath in such a great vibe, and only a few hours before the end did I lose my temper about, well, I didn't even lose my temper, but I was harsh. Oh, pardon me. I guess I did lose my temper. My Sabbath was lovely, blessed, beautiful, wonderful, a taste of the world to come. Played with my kids, rested, learned some Torah. It was, ate good food. It was truly a taste of the world to come. Really great, also taking on Yom Rishon. Oh, that's nice. David G, message retracted. So David G had a few messages retracted. I hope that I either answered questions that he had, not even knowing it, or well, I don't know what. To David, he'll get there unless YouTube censored it on us. Okay. Sneezer says, when I said join us in the chat, if you don't live stream, it was in reference to you saying helps you not feel too depressed to stream. Oh, I see, to join you in the chat, even if I'm too depressed to stream. That is not a bad idea. If I'm ever too depressed to stream, and I'm feeling so unworthy and so lowly that I can't even do this thing, to be in the chat, you know what? Maybe it will come to pass, and maybe not. But just the fact that you would suggest that is makes me smile, and I appreciate it. Bingo 100%, says Sneezer. And Sneezer says, Taylor, when do you think the Mashiach era arrives? Peace and Coffee asks, have you ever noticed or heard how converts tend to be more pious or religious than those who were born into that particular group or religion? Converts can express more piety. Well, I think that those who are born into a particular group obviously have a certain view and outlook. And in some religions and faiths and ways of life, it's driven into you and you're indoctrinated to such a degree that you feel compelled to stay. Converts make that choice, and you can argue as to the nature of the choice and why they made it, but it's a choice they make because they choose to change their life sometimes drastically in service of a, let's say, revelation that they received, or in one way or another, something happened in their life. They can express more piety. I don't know. They definitely tend to be the ones that I've met are all in. And so just from my experience, I don't know if 100% across the board, there are no absolutes, but the ones that I have met, I'm not going to compare them to those who were religious from the get-go. I'm just going to say that I've met some really pious converts. So yes. And some really, there's like a fire in them, man. Now that also exists in those who were born into the faith. But there's a fire in converts that I've met, which, let's say, would rival if not more, piety than someone who was born into it. Sneezer says to Taylor, we are in it. I've seen Christ awaken in many. By the way, BMXers says, wait. Oh man, I lost it. Here. BMXer says, I edited my comment about Bob Marley on HN's latest post if anybody wants to read all that jazz. Taylor says to Sneezer, you know any books that give more info on angels and demons? And he replies, demon means misunderstood. They take patience and a good compass pointing towards love. They take patience and a good compass. Sneezer, says Taylor, didn't used to believe in angels, demons, but I've come across channeled books, and only spiritual beings could have been the source of such books. Channeling, Sneezer says to Taylor, channeling and other magics are very real. I'm a medium, but never summon. God made me a speaker for the dead. Incidentally, something that's not allowed in Judaism, according to Torah at any rate. Doresh el Hametim. And very famously, King Saul goes to the Ba'alat Ov and to raise Shmuel from his rest. And Shmuel is upset. And he gives him some bad news. BMXer says, when darkness turns to light, it ends tonight, it ends tonight, it ends tonight. That's a Bob Marley quote? I don't know if I know that one. What song is it? Please share. Sneezer says, meaning they come and go at whim, delving what messages they need. They come and go at whim, these angels and demons, delving what messages they need. I'm usually not aware of it. Okay, so it is a kind of trance that you go into where you are subjected to different forces, external ones, and they manifest physically, metaphysically inside of you in your life. They plant a seed, they reveal messages, right? And then later you can interpret it? Or is it very clear-cut A, B, C, right? Aleph, Bet, Gimel. BMXers, oh, the All-American Rejects. Right, so that's a different quote, not Bob Marley. I know the name of the band All-American Rejects, but I don't know, I've never heard them, or maybe I've heard them incidentally, inconsequentially, in a way, like on the radio or whatnot. David G says, this is like a yeshiva lesson. Wow, I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you so much, but I am not a scholar, I am not a rabbi, I am not a man of halacha, though I had my yeshiva years and they've taught me so much, and I still carry on in some ways of Orthodox Judaism, though I don't consider myself religious or Orthodox, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt. I would say it's more like a hitva'adut, more than a yeshiva lesson, right? A lesson would be like a shiur with your master, or a shiur klali from the master of the yeshiva, right? The Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the place. But I think this is more of like a hitva'adut, of getting to know each other and oneself. That's how I see it. But I do the words. I take it in the best possible way. I thank you. Peace and Coffee asks, is it possible for a Jewish soul to be reborn into a non-Jewish life? Yes, if I'm not mistaken. First of all, once again, it's a machloket, it's a controversy, a difference of opinion on whether or not there is reincarnation. And Kabbalists very plainly say yes. Ancient ones, modern ones. And there is an order, at least according to some traditions, there is an order in which you are reincarnated according to the Datzcham, which is Domem Tzomeach Chai Medaber, which is animal, vegetable, mineral, and speaking. The four levels of creation, of creations, let's say, in this world, that correspond with the four-letter name of God, right? Animal, mineral, vegetable, animal, and speaking. Though animals do have their own speech, we have that divine speech, right? God spoke being into the world. We are the image of God. We have different speech. Speaking of the chirping of the birds. David G. says Sneezer. So is it possible? It's possible, depends on who you ask. So yes, it is possible. They say that for a Hebrew soul, if you will, to be in a non-Hebrew body, if it's a kind of punishment, presumably it would be as a way of shedding the klipot, right, the shells, the karma, burning it off of you, by subjecting you to being not fitting in, right? You're not pegged in that body. You're sort of in an unnatural state, as a soul in that body. There's something unnatural about it, spiritually speaking, because yes, we do share a root as one human race. But once we split up, and in some ways even before that, because there are differences, but when we split up, when we split up into Hebrews and nations, there was a great divide there made. And maybe when we all come together once again in one way under one banner to partake of the tree of life, that will be null and void, and a new revelation, a new consciousness will reveal itself. But the idea of a non-Jewish soul of a Jewish soul in a non-Jewish life, it means that the Jewish soul yearns, if you will, to mirror the divine revelation in the body and in life. So to be able to have it on the inside, but have almost none of it manifest, practically speaking, on the outside. Because even if we're talking about a righteous Gentile, if you will, and there are plenty of them, I'd wager most of the world have righteousness about them, and they're Gentiles. So even though it sometimes is seen as a punishment and a great suffering for a Jewish soul to be in a non-Jewish life, in a reincarnation, if such a thing exists, because once again, I don't know too much of it, of the reincarnation. I've never delved deeply into it, though I'm sure I've read some teachings of the Ari, some teachings of the Ramak, but it's not something I know offhand and can give you examples and can give you different paths and ideas. So is it possible? I'm sorry, that's a long-winded way to say yes. David G says, Sneezer, this is us discussing our similarities and differences in 5D, time independent. Robert Harrison says, I wonder if anyone has rode their BMX bike off a roof of a house and landed it. You wonder? The answer is obviously yes, and I say that not being a BMXer. BMXers with dreadlocks gives them a smiley. Radar says, converts have fresh eyes and tend to be more legalistic. Oh, I spoke of converts a few minutes ago. That means we're getting close to the edge here. And then it's the question of whether or not I shall go to my notes that I didn't even get to yet, because I started with the old chat, and this is the new chat, and then it's the old notes. But I don't think I'll get to them. We'll see. Legalistic. Tend to be more legalistic. That may be, yeah. BMXers, says Sneezer. No, not a fan of broken bones, like kryptonite to me. He continues and says, how can you mourn for the temple, knowing full well your body is the temple? You mourn for the temple in Tikkun Chatzot because there's what's called Tikkun Rachel and Tikkun Leah, meaning with your words and with your mourning and with your prayers, you awaken the two feminines of Rachel and Leah. And the Leah signifies a higher feminine, Rachel signifies a lower feminine, but we know that Yaakov loved Rachel, married Leah first, the whole thing with the sons and the way that came about, and here take this plant and go be with him, and the rivalry, and this idea of Tikkun Chatzot, when you wake up at midnight to pray and you mourn for the temple, you would do the same thing even before the temple, not mourning, but trying to have that tikkun of the feminine. Because that's a time when the feminine, which is nighttime traditionally, and the moon, the time when the moon has authority, that goes away. That bit between midnight and between the right before sunrise, that's when there's the change, right? And the male goes in the sun, and different other names and revelations, and so you mourn the temple because the temple signified that higher feminine, that place of worship. It signified Malchut, and in the time of the temple, Malchut and Tiferet, the female and the male divine revelations, were in union, were united. They worked together in unison. Israel being the feminine, the divine revelation being the masculine, right? Israel being the bride, and the divine revelation being the groom. You mourn for that divine connection. So even if you don't mourn for the temple, you mourn for that which the temple symbolized, and it symbolizes us, the original temple, right? As you say, in our own, right? We mourn because we also still have a job to do, and it is because of us not doing our job all the way properly that we are still in this exile without the physical temple, unable to bridge that great gap and dissonance, so to speak, between where we are and where we ought to be. And that building is a kind of bridge. The ritual worship is a kind of bridge. Like I say many times, it's not necessarily needed because we were the original temple, and so on and so forth. So how can I mourn for the temple? I don't do Tikkun Chatzot. I haven't done it since my yeshiva days, or maybe definitely a decade or more since I did Tikkun Chatzot, and I never did it regularly every single night. I have woken up, I have gone to sleep at sunset at times and woken up at the Hebrew midnight, if you will, to say Tikkun Chatzot and Tikkun Le'ah to the light of a candle. Very dramatic and theatrical. I did that several times. I never said it regularly. But yes, you can mourn for the temple. You can mourn for the temple in the way that you mourn for the parts of you that are not all that you can be. And yes, for the ritual worship, more than half the commandments in the Torah pertain to the ritual worship, and it's part of how we unify the male and female practically, physically, externally in this world. And should we be zoche, as they say, that we won't need the temple anymore, and it will be just us, the image of God, shining, mirroring that soul, that divine spark. BMX says to Robert, yes, many times, but only professionals. Don't try this on home. Don't try this on home. Peace and Coffee says, question, what are your thoughts on reincarnation? Well, I guess I gave it to you, the gist of it, when I was speaking about, your other question about reincarnation. Those were my basic thoughts. Robert Harrison gives a smiley, crying tears of laughter. BMXer says, Sneezer, what do you mean? And he replies, I've said too much that can be mistaken. Specify. That's the kind of thing I would say. For sure. Taylor26 says, Sneezer, did God allow more spirit channeling for humanity after the Protestant Reformation and Emanuel Swedenborg's visions of the divided afterlife? So much that went over my head. It's a good thing I'm not the one being asked. You don't have to break your bones, says BMXers. It depends on what you do. That's true. BMXers and spirit channelers alike. It depends on what you do. Taylor26 says to Sneezer. Sneezer says to Taylor26, God doesn't change things. God set the pool rack and broke it. We are balls bouncing around. All we can change is spin forward God's will, or backwards denying it. Forward towards God's will, or backwards denying it. Robert says to Sneezer, have you ever done a dangerous bike trick in your life? Oh, I think I got cut off. Hopefully not for a very long time. But we'll see. It says I'm live again. Hopefully I'm live again. Maybe it was a second, maybe it was a few. I don't know. I didn't look. Let's see. Oh, but wait. Where are we going? Where's it going? The chat just jumped to the end, and I don't know where I am. Wow, there's a lot in the chat here, and I've almost been on for 2 hours. Let's see. Whoa! Here it is. Okay, here we are. I'm sorry about that. So right, the pool rack. Have you ever done a dangerous bike trick? Sneezer says, for every choice, there is what God wants you to do, and what you will still do, but goes into one of those wrong futures I described that inevitably loops back, and we forget. For every choice, there is what God wants you to do and what you will still do, but goes into one of those wrong futures I described that inevitably loops back, and we forget. Forget, and so we do it again? Is that what you're saying? Make the same mistakes? Sneezer says to Robert, trick denotes attempting. Sneezer continues and says to Robert, I have, however, done some pretty impressive wipeouts. Dude, that is impressive. BMXer says, by the way, there's BMX shoes. I really want that my favorite female BMXer also have. That says on the inside, we are all evil, aren't we? It's posed as question, but I think for a reason. Well, we certainly have it in our ability and capacity to be evil. That's always proven. Sneezer says, my understanding from my revelation is the 13th tribe used to represent travelers, everyone else. Right, those on a faraway journey. I hear you. I don't necessarily agree that they're part of the house of Israel, but definitely I agree with you that they represent, that they can represent that unified humanity eventually, right, as a 13th tribe. The young Levite, hey there, I'm aware of the Pashtun. Nice to see you here, man. Rabbi Harry Rosenberg is doing great work with many of the tribes. Now, is he in India? Is it India? I'm thinking it's India. I don't recall. BMXers says, to get people thinking, but about the wrong thing, I would say. It's a collaboration, shoes. It's a collaboration, shoes of Vans with the BMX company, says BMXers. Vans have become more and more Illuminati. I know nothing about the Illuminati, by the way. So I don't know exactly what you mean that they're becoming that. If there are people literally in those companies, in that company, Vans are becoming part of the Illuminati, of that group. Sneezer says, check out my music. It's at least mediocre. And of course, every genre imaginable. Does he say, is it, oh, okay. After the stream, of course. Yes, of course. Young Levite, thank you, bro. I'll go running if I get called, as in away. That's key. Thou shalt not kill. No, it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It says lo tirtzach. It says thou shalt not commit murder. It doesn't say don't kill. Big difference. Sinwar, says Robert, has a lot of sins to pay for. I'm not going to say anything about him, but yeah. Yeah. So do I, but different ones. Sneezer says, sometimes we have to, but usually not. Radar Shadow said, yeah, when the fight is in your yard, action is required. I wholeheartedly agree. 1.5 hour reminder, probably 2 by now. Don't neglect the missus. Thank you, I appreciate that. But she is long, she's already asleep for a long time. It's midnight, or 2 minutes now to midnight. I should probably go too. Maybe this is a good time to stop. Yes, now that you mention it, now's a good time to stop. 2 hours, right? The mainstream midnight as opposed to Chatzot Halayl, or Chatzot Halayla, depends how you look at it. Thank you all for being here, all of you. I'll go on quickly, and if there's anybody else that I won't get to now, but I can give them, give them a shout out here, or is it just the crowd that's here now? Oh, Tyrone, hey Tyrone, I'm sorry, I can't see that flag of Israel with dung next to it right now. I'll have to see it next time. Who else? Tyrone, United States. Who else? Cat K is here. And who else? I think that's it. Okay, so Tyrone, Cat K, and all the others here. Something tells me that you're not a fan of Israel. Am I right? That's too bad. That's too bad. I'm going to continue this. God willing, tomorrow, Monday, 10 p.m., live from Jerusalem. See you then.